Hello, you have tuned into hashtag This Is My City with your host, Tom Sommers of Caldwell Banker, Minnesota.
I'm coming home to you.
This week's show is brought to you by RKH Images, Weddings and Event Photography. To inquire about their services, go to www.rkh-images.com, where Kyle and Tracy Hansen will be happy to answer any question you have and take care of all of your photography needs. HiFi Hair and Records, where music is fashion, located downtown near Loring Park. You can call Johnny at 612-486-5900 to book a hair service or to inquire about the record store. Heavy Metal Grill, Twin Cities' hottest food truck, available for corporate lunches, graduation parties, and special events. Reach out to Marty at 612-310-7266 or find Heavy Metal Grill on Facebook. Good morning, John.
Good morning. Does the podcast still have that new podcast smell?
I think so, yeah. You know, we're taking it out, and in fact, here we sit, we're re-recording because something got screwed up with the audio the first time around, so it's a beginner's growing process. And John and I have been the closest of friends since, I think, the 8th grade, so some of the stuff I know, but I wanted to share this with you because he has a very interesting story, and he's an integral part of the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area, or Minnesota in general. So let's start out and talk about where you grew up.
I grew up in southwest Minneapolis, formerly just southwest Minneapolis. Now they call it Linden Hills. It used to just be, this little blue-collar neighborhood that nobody really knew about, but so be it.
Zenith, wasn't it?
Zenith, yes. Yes.
But then you ended up going to high school in Minnetonka.
I did. I graduated from illustrious Minnetonka High School. I think I lettered in being a fart in an elevator.
Yeah, I'd say that describes you perfectly. And we actually became friends in the 8th grade, of all places, at Sheepsgate, which no longer exists. It was on the corner of Cedar Lake Road and Hopkins Crossroads, which is now an Aldi. And I went to Hopkins High School. So there was a familiarity there because we were close together. We developed a friendship. I won't go into all the details of that because this is about John. But you graduated from high school in Minnetonka, and I want to revisit this. You were in a thing called mini school, which probably doesn't exist anymore, and tell everybody a little bit about that.
I don't believe it does, and which is sad. It was a program set up by some incredibly cool teachers that had an idea of building a program in high school to keep kids in school that would otherwise drop out, or to bring them back that had dropped out. And the whole program was based on life skills, things that you would actually use later on in your life. And so it was a bit more lax in some regards, but it was also a lot more challenging in others.
Well, and the thing that I thought was really interesting about that period in time is you're in mini school, like he was saying, more of life skills, and it wasn't like a regular curriculum. But yet, when you graduated, you gave the speech to the graduating class.
I did. Well, I had dropped out, and I came back, and I sort of went through a lot of different phases in high school. My final phase in high school was sort of a challenge on a $50 bet that I couldn't take all accelerated courses and pass them, which I'm like, $50? Sure.
So that's a lot. That was a lot of money back then.
Well,
it really was.
Yeah, but it just challenged me in different ways, and so I spent a year taking courses that were academically, a lot more challenging, and I passed with remarkably good grades.
Yeah, I remember all of that. So you give the speech, you graduate from high school, and then you end up going to the mansion, which was Horst, for hairdressing. Cosmetology, which is
Yeah.
now morphed into Aveda because Horst was the one who started that line. So what led you to wanting to become a hairdresser?
Well, when I had dropped out, I had also moved out, and I didn't have any money, didn't have really any way of paying rent, getting groceries, buying weed.
Yeah.
So, so I started cutting my own hair. I started cutting all of my friends' hair and all of their girlfriends' hair, and really and truly, it quite quickly morphed into, this is what I could do for a living. This is a pretty cool job.
Well, and what I remember most is you actually had the interest in doing it well before you went to school.
Yeah.
Because there was a party that we were at, and our friend Brandon, we handcuffed him to the toilet and cut his hair because he was complaining about how he wanted a haircut, and John turned him into Rod Stewart right then and there without like any skills, and it was probably with like a kitchen shears for what all I remember.
Yeah, I'm certain we scored a pair of Fiskars out of somebody's drawer in a kitchen.
And he was just mortified, but he looked really cool.
He looked really cool.
Yeah, and the next day he went to school, and everyone's like, wow, you look awesome, dude. It was absolutely fantastic. So it made sense when you told me that you were going to go to Horst to become a hairdresser. Talk a little bit about the mansion.
That could very well be one of the greatest educational experiences, post high school that anybody could ever go through. It was very creative. It was small. People. It was an amazing thing. I bet that building actually, if you went in there today, would probably still smell like weed and sex.
Probably.
But I'll tell you, we had the most incredible group of young, creative instructors, and the student body. We were all there to be creative, to learn, to do all of these things. We played hard, we worked hard, and there was no gray area. It was either really good or it really sucked.
Yeah, and full disclosure as well, that was my very first career was cutting hair. Although it didn't seem like it was a fit for me, but I knew that was the right place to go. And to John's point, it was magical.
Yeah.
That place, there was something about it, but it also couldn't sustain what it was for a myriad of reasons. And now it has morphed into this huge Aveda concept.
Yeah.
School, which it's just changed. It's not the same anymore. So you graduate from Horst. You're now a licensed cosmetologist. Where was your first job?
My first job was at Regis Salon in Knollwood Mall in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. And at that time, the Regis Corporation had chosen that they really wanted to move more into the creative sort of spa salon situation. And they brought in this huge team of Sassoon educators, and we're talking like the cream of the crop hair cutters on the planet, and these people were all creating the education and the direction for Regis salons throughout the country, and this is the early mid-'80s. So it was a big transition point for their salons,
Well, and up until that point, Regis also was kind of known as the mall salon.
Yeah.
Most of them were in Ridgedale, Southdale, Brookdale, that type of thing. And they catered to families, but they weren't considered to be similar to, a Horst or John English, something like that. It was much more of a family-oriented salon. Would you think that's a fair way to say it?
That is, and that's exactly their purpose behind changing their direction at that particular time. And they did quite a remarkable job in changing their brand and moving in a higher quality direction. At the time, they were sort of in the mid-range malls. They hadn't quite reached the Dale pinnacle just yet. I worked actually at Knollwood for, I believe it was like 2 years. And then they finally, at that point, they were going to open their very first salon in Southdale, which at the time was the pinnacle mall. You know, I mean, that was the one. You know, I mean, that was the King Mall, and amazingly, they asked this young whippersnapper young kid to be the manager of that particular mall, or that particular salon in that particular mall. And so here I am. I'm like 21, I think, at the time, and I'm managing their flagship salon in the, you know, the Target mall that everybody wanted to be in.
You called me up and I'm like, no, really, what are you doing? I could not believe they hired you to do that. But tell the story about when they brought in all these people from Vidal Sassoon. They had like a training program.
Yeah.
And who was invited, who was not? Because that's an interesting story.
They would have photo shoots or educational meetings, you know, ways in which they direct, you know, like they would all get together and discuss how they were going to go or what they were going to do, or they would do their private educational things or photo shoots, and they would kind of handpick people to go in and help them out with these things, and you kind of had to be invited, you know, to be a part of this, and usually it didn't, you know, involve a whole lot other than just sort of sweeping up or helping out or whatever, that kind of thing. And at that time I was working in Knollwood, and there was no way they were going to ask me, because I was I was kind of known amongst them as just this young smart ass kid who, you know.
Yeah, you had the reputation at Horst also.
Well, yeah, there was that. And so I decided that the best way for me to get involved with this was just to go guerrilla on it and just show up, which I did. I found out when they were doing this and where they were holding it, and I just showed up and figured nobody's going to sit around and ask each other who invited this twerp.
Right. Well, yeah.
Which is exactly what happened. You know, they all kind of gave me the stink eye and a weird sort of cockeyed thing. And throughout the day, they proceeded to completely bust my balls for about 12 hours. And they did. And, you know, these guys, you know, they are some of the best. And they worked me like a dog all day long. And at the end of the day, I was still standing, and I remember them at the end of the day saying, "Well, Johnny, I guess we're going to have to have you back."
That's great. Well, and you obviously knew at that point that getting into that day was really important to the advancement of your career if you're going to make this a lifetime thing.
Well, that was huge. I mean, it really was. And you know, sometimes I think, actually oftentimes, and not just in my industry, but in so many others, if you sit around and you wait for something to happen, you're going to be sitting around waiting for a long time.
Yeah.
Or you can just make that decision yourself and you can make it happen.
And I think it's also fair to point this out, and you can correct me on this because I don't know what it is like now, but back in the day, in the mid-'80s, early '80s, Minneapolis, per capita, had almost the most salons of any city in the country. And just how some people equate music with this town, which is a big piece we'll talk about. A lot of people around the world equated hairdressing, fashion, and you know, all of the different things that go along with being innovative in the field tied to Minneapolis, and not just because of Horst, several different ones. So that's why with Regis, it was such an important thing, I think, for them to jump out of those mid-level malls to try to make a statement that, hey, we count too, and that our hairdressers are just as good as any hairdresser in any of the other salons.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a tremendous parallel between the music and the hair and fashion in the Twin Cities back then. I mean, there really truly is. And I think, honestly, neither one of them would have exceeded, how they did without the other.
Right.
And, music and fashion in the Twin Cities was paramount. I mean, it was, and as history has proven, with the advent of new wave and the funk scene and all of that throughout the history of music in the 80s. I mean, it shows. I mean,
Well, yeah, and your tagline is HiFi Hair where music is fashion. And I the first time I heard that, I thought that's brilliant because it encompasses everything you have.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
So you worked with Regis for a couple of years.
I did.
Now, at the time, Jon had met and married his girlfriend from Horst, Jennifer,
Yes.
who is from Michigan. So then you made the decision after being at Regis for a while that it was time to leave town and move to Michigan. Why?
We went to Michigan to care for my then wife's mother, who was a bit older, living alone. And so we kind of wanted to make sure that she was taken care of and cared for. So we moved to West Michigan, and I'm thinking, Michigan, all right, Detroit, rock and roll. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's on the other side of Michigan.
Yeah, you ended up in Grand Rapids.
So here we are in Grand Rapids, Michigan. A far cry from Minneapolis culture-wise,
If you had to sum up Grand Rapids in a comparison with another city in Minnesota, what would it be equal in size to?
Size-wise?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose probably size-wise, it's about the size of St. Paul, but we always think of Minneapolis, St. Paul as sort of collective,
Yeah.
And so it's about the size of St. Paul and culturally somewhere in the neighborhood of St. Cloud.
Okay.
So,
It's very conservative.
Yeah.
It's behind the times because I
Well,
also believe,
yeah.
it was because I also believe that one of the things that really changed cities and got some of the smaller cities to catch up to the larger areas is MTV
Yeah.
and other cable news networks and channels, because now people in smaller cities could start to see stuff that was happening in larger places like New York and LA in a much quicker time frame than in before. But when you go to Grand Rapids and you have all this experience and you come from one of the best schools in the world, what was your first challenge when you got there?
Well, that kind of was my first challenge is coming from Horst and from Minneapolis and all of that. So that was a little bit of a challenge because, it's sort of, if you're walking into a city and thinking, or, having people think that, here's this hotshot guy or whatever, then, you have a few hurdles to cross.
Yeah.
So,
well, and was it also one of those issues too where, like in some cities, like say Northfield, most of the people that live in Northfield that I've met have been there their whole lives. So now you, as someone who's
Exactly.
not from there, comes
Yeah.
to live. What was that like?
Yeah, the long-haired outsider, rock and roll looking, leather wearing, all black goth looking guy. Yeah, that didn't it didn't bode really well. I mean, it took a while.
Yeah.
It did. But, people knew who I was.
Yeah. Well, and so after a few years there,
Yeah.
you guys decided to open up a salon, another one that I would consider to be cutting edge and extremely unique called Coiffeteria. Even the name was great. But what I found to be so interesting about it is it was in an old house, just like something you would see on Hennepin Avenue where they have some different businesses. And you converted this home that was on the edge of like uptown type district, right?
Sure.
Okay. Into this amazing forward-thinking salon that they had nothing like this before. How did you build that?
It was all bootstrap. I mean, it was one of those things where, we had this idea of opening a business, and the whole idea behind the business was just to do something that strictly for the stylist, for ourselves.
It can be really intimidating sometimes. So I think the challenge is to remove all of that. And you were able to do that with Coiffeteria.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I really do. And I'm pretty proud of it. We were very young. God, I think I was 27 when we opened that place, 26 or 27, something like that. And, we saved for, styling chairs. We really used no salon equipment at all. It was strictly using, like antiques or salvaged furniture, things like that. We even acquired a couple of couches from you. I think.
Yeah, they were Victorian in nature, and then you redid them. You had the reupholstered, and those were your basically your waiting area.
Our waiting area.
Yeah. It was really unique. So you did that for a number of years, and you were in Grand Rapids for a total of 14
or 15 years, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
So then at some point things change. You end up getting divorced.
Yep.
And you are going to leave Grand Rapids, and I'll never forget this. I mentioned it to you before, but I'm going to ask this before we get this far, because many people don't know that Jon was the curator of the Gerald R. Ford Museum for a number of years, and I would love for you to explain how you ended up in that position, because I know Jerry Ford is a hero of yours.
Well, if you can become president by default, you've done something right.
Exactly, and I think that's why you like him so much.
It just needed to be recognized.
Yes.
Not just another 38th president of the United States.
No, he is.
But the 38th president of the United States.
So the whole thing falls apart. You decide to get divorced and move back here. But I remember having this conversation with you. You were obviously upset because your life is changing, and you said to me, maybe I'll just buy a Harley Davidson and I'll just drive around the country and live in Florida or Texas or wherever it was. And I remember hanging up the phone going, no, he's not. He's coming back here. Yeah. So what do you remember, like when you were in the midst of all of this change, what was it that made you feel like, okay, I should come back here?
Well, I got a phone call from my old friend Terry, she was the director at Aveda Institute at the time, and she asked me to come back and do some work there for a month, and it was perfect timing because I needed to take a break and get away and whatever, and I was feeling as though all of my creativity had been sort of diminished over the years, and I really didn't have anything left.
Was the creativity diminished because you got into like a pattern?
Yeah, I think it was
a
comfort pattern, and when everything's going your way, and you are perceived to have reached this thing where all of your dreams have been achieved. And then you find out, wait a second, that really wasn't my dream. It was just sort of a perception of whatever. And I kind of felt like, as successful as that salon was, and as good as life may have looked, it really wasn't what I wanted. It just wasn't. It wasn't the thing that makes me happy. And so I came back here for a month, and over the phone I rented this horrible apartment out by the airport.
Horrible.
I mean, like just
horrible.
This transient sort of furnished apartment that you could live in for a period of time. And I had no idea until I showed up here, and Tommy was with me when we opened up the door with the key. And we opened up the door, and a swift smell of, I don't know, what would you call it? Ass. I think ass is what you would call it.
It was awful. And this was in the transition period where they were building the Mall of America.
Yeah.
And they hadn't redone a lot of stuff in Richfield yet, so you had a lot of these monthly apartments where it was just kind of everything was run down. But, you know, there was a reason for all of this.
So I lived in it, you know, for a month while, and I didn't tell anybody else that I was in town. I didn't tell any of my friends. I didn't tell any of my family. I just kind of lived as a ghost in my city for a month while I was teaching at Aveda. And that was the light bulb. That was everything, you know, because suddenly I you know, these students kind of gave me this notion that, you know, I still had something left to give. And then, you know, when you visit your own city as a ghost, you discover and recognize things that you don't normally visit or revisit, you know, and I began to realize that there was so much more that I hadn't yet tapped into, and I needed to come back home. And that was it. That, you know, it took me about a week or so to contact my then wife and just say, you know, I think it's time, and you can come with me, or we can go our separate ways, and all is good. And we were both kind of in that same position, so we chose to go our separate ways, and it all worked out pretty well. The biggest challenge, I think, you know, I love what I do. I love standing behind a chair and talking to people, doing their hair, telling dirty jokes, listening to music. You know, I love all of that, right? Sitting on my hands is the hardest thing. And so, you know, I've tried to spend my time working in my garden, like adding an addition to our tree house for our kids.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know about this tree fort, it looks like a Viking ship. And I think he's doing it twofold. Number one, because he's doing it for his sanity and for his kids. But secondly, I think he's making it look like the Viking ship because we're all proud Vikings fans here. And his friend Craig, who's a wonderful neighbor down the street, is a Packers fan. So what better thing than to have him come out of his back door, look down the alley, and see a Vikings thing. But I want to, though.
But I think, you know, Ed, we're going to get through this. And, you know, in the meantime, I come down here every day because, you know, this is it's my routine. It's my, you know, my baby, all of that. And, you know, so I come down, I make a stupid video.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to touch on. So he makes these videos every single day, and they're all silly, but they're fun. And I think that it has a much larger impact than you even realize because you're connecting with people every day. And I see comment after comment of how they laughed or you made me smile today. It's all good. It's not political. It's not religious. It's not anything that has to do with controversy. And it's certainly not a downer. It's all lighthearted and fun. And I don't know if you've realized what you've created, but you may be stuck doing that moving forward.
That's what I have a fear of that. But it, you know, it's just we all need something. You know, we don't. You know, everyone's in these uncertain times.
Right.
We all. I don't know. You know, we need something, and you know, there's no secret as to, you know, where I stand politically, and I'm not going to go into that. But you know, you can go on and on about things like that, or you can find a different way to present yourself or to bring people together, and
right.
So there's that, you know. So I get up and usually I have no idea what the hell I'm going to do until about 5 minutes before I do it.
Which is what makes it great.
And,
because it's the pre-planning. The pre-planning sometimes wrecks it. And for me, I understand that because to me, art is so important and creativity is so important. I am not blessed with the ability to play the guitar.
Yeah.
or play an instrument. But the one thing that I found, and I love selling houses.
Sure.
Real estate's great because I love helping people, but there's not a creative aspect to that. I mean, there's creativeness in contracts and things like that.
Ways.
But my voice is my photography, and now this.
Yeah.
I want everyone to understand from around the world or right in our backyard how incredibly great this city is and how it's filled with people like Jon that really care about where they live and their community. So I think that what you're doing is something I'm just so incredibly proud of, all that you've created, because you started literally, this was just a shell and we hung these lights, and he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to put some posters up on the wall, and the next thing you know, he's got a confessional booth and he finds all of these really cool old barber chairs and he redoes them, and you got to come down here for yourself and check it out, because you will be absolutely blown away. Even if you come down just to hang and look at some records, do so. We're hoping you're going to open up again very soon, and that this is something that we can all put behind us and move
Fingers
forward.
crossed.
Anything else you would like people to know about you or the salon?
Well, we're not going anywhere. I'm too damn stupid and belligerent to
Stubborn.
give it up.
Yeah.
So, we'll be here, and, we have the hair salon, we have the record store. If you want to just come and say hi, you can come and say hi. Nobody's going to give you the stink eye about that. But come down and say hi and see us, and visit our museum, because music is fashion, and our music is our city. And I'm Jon Clifford, and I'm a hairdresser, and this is Minneapolis, and I love my city.
I don't know what else to say. That's the perfect way to end it. Thanks, Jon.
Happy birthday, Tommy.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, whatever.
To you.